Hello my friends and welcome to the 11th class in our writing course. Today my friends we are carrying on talking about complex sentences, specifically the second type, the complex sentences with adjective clauses. And today my friends our class is allocated to talk about adjective relative pronouns around which a lot of questions have been being asked. And as I notice my friends, since I have started my career as an English teacher, I have been being asked about them for millions of times, let's say. And I noticed that they are the biggest problem or the biggest obstacle in our students' way. Today, my friends, we are going to try to finish this problem easily. Before I start talking about them, allow me to give you a quick revision for the 10th class. In the 10th class, my friend, we talked about complex sentences with adjective clauses, and we said that an adjective clause is a group of words that modifies or describes a noun or a situation, and they comes after the noun, and it begins with words or relative pronouns like who, whom, which, when, where, that, among others. And we said that we have two types of relative adjective clauses. The first type is called restrictive or defining adjective clauses, and a restrictive defining clause is a clause that without it the described noun is not known. We use it to give vital information or defining information about the noun, and without it the noun is not known, as we said. And we said that those cannot be deleted. If we delete them, the noun which is being described is going to be let's say anonymous or unknown again. And here we cannot separate them with commas. On the other hand, my friends, we said that a non-restrictive or non-defining clause is that. On the other hand, my friends, we talked about non-restrictive or non-defining clause, and we said that with or without this clause, the described noun is known and expresses extra information that is not needed to define the described noun, which means if we delete it, we still know the described or the modified noun, because it only gives extra information which is not needed to clarify the described noun, and those can be easily deleted. And again, my friends, those can be separated with commas. After this quick revision, my friends, let's start with the relative pronouns used to make adjective clauses. I would like to start with the first one. Here we use it for people. We have who and that when a person is subject, and we use whom or that when the person or people described are object, and we have whose when the person or the people are in the possessive situation. Allow me to start with whose. Here, my friends, we have my friend plays in the national team, and I have the second, let's say, second simple sentence. My friend's mother is our math teacher. Again, my friends, the main reason we use relative adjective clauses to make complex sentences is to merge two simple sentences to make one complex sentence, of course, by transferring one independent clause into a dependent clause. In here, my friends, I have the two simple sentences. Every simple sentence is originally an independent clause, but as long as we have the comma here, we transferred it into a simple sentence. And here, my friends, I'm talking about the same person, my friend, and my friend here, so that I merge these two independent clauses or these two simple sentences inside one complex sentence by changing one of those independent clauses into a dependent clause. Let's see here, we have this option here. We say, my friend plays in the national team. I have my friend's mother is our math teacher. I start with my friend. Here, my friends with the S, possessive S. I change it into whose. I say my friend whose mother is our math teacher plays in the national team. Again, my friends, here this independent clause has been changed into a dependent clause by adding this relative pronoun, which is a conjunction. And here, my friends, second example, we have my neighbor is very polite. This is the first simple sentence, which is originally an independent clause, and this is the second one. My neighbor's children always play with us. This is the second simple sentence, which is originally an independent clause. I should merge them together to make them one complex sentence. In here, my friends, my neighbor whose, I take the repeated noun with the possessive S and I replace it with this relative pronoun whose. Again, my neighbor whose children always play with us is very polite. Again, my friends, the first simple sentence, I made it as the main sentence, and I change the second simple sentence or the second independent clause into a dependent clause, which is going to be used to describe my neighbor. Again, here, my friends, I go to who and that, and we use them to describe a subject, a person, when this person is a subject. And we talked about this in the previous class, but it's not a problem to give a quick revision. In here we have the scientist proved that AIDS is incurable. This is the first simple sentence, which is originally an independent clause with a full stop. The second one is the scientist published his research last year. Again, my friends, I have here two options. In the first one, I had one option only because I need to take the repeated noun with the possessive pronoun to use whose. In here, my friends, I can choose one of these two subjects, which is repeated, of course, the scientist and the scientist. Here I have two options. The first option is to use the first simple sentence here in blue as the main sentence, and then I change the second simple sentence or the second independent clause into a dependent clause, deleting the subject using a relative pronoun to change it or to transfer it from an independent clause into a dependent clause according to the definition of a dependent clause, which starts with a subordinator. And here, my friends, I deleted the noun phrase and I put the subordinator. That's why now this here in black, this clause has become dependent. Again, my friends, the second sentence here, I choose the second option. I use this simple sentence as the main sentence here in black. Then I change this independent clause into a dependent clause, deleting the repeated subject and replacing it with a subordinator or a relative pronoun here, my friends. Let's read the sentence. The scientist published his research last year. Here, to describe the sentence, the scientist, we say the scientist who proved that AIDS is incurable published his research last year. The third example here, or the second example in this case, we have these two independent clauses or simple sentences. I start with millions of people died in World War II in the plague. Here, this is the first one. The second one, millions of people witnessed the war's atrocities. Here, my friends, again, I have two options. The case of whose, I have only one option again, my friends. Why? Because whose represents a possessity, or it is used with the repeated noun with the possessive s. In here I have only one option. In here the who can be used to describe the subject. In here the subject is repeated, so I can choose one of those two subjects because I am not restricted to one of them. And here, my friends, the first option is to choose the first simple sentence as the main sentence, and I changed the other simple sentence or the independent clause into a dependent clause. Again, my friends, by deleting the repeated subject and replacing it with a subordinator. In our case, it is a relative clause, a relative pronoun here, my friends, who say millions of people who witnessed the war's atrocities died in World War II in the plague. The second option, my friends, is to choose this simple sentence as the main sentence and transfer this simple sentence, which is originally an independent clause, and transfer it into a dependent clause by, again, deleting the repeated subject and replacing it with a subordinator. Now, my friends, this clause is dependent or subordinating clause because I changed the subject, which is a noun phrase, and I put a subordinating conjunction to transfer it into a dependent clause. Now, my friends, let's talk about the relative pronoun for people when the person or people are in the position of an object. I have here two examples. The first example here, I visited the girl in the hospital. Till here, the first simple sentence finishes. And the second one here, my brother hit the girl with his car by mistake. And here, my friends, as you notice, the word the girl is repeated in both sentences. And here, my friend, it is the object, and here it's an object. Now, my friends, let's merge these two independent clauses or two simple sentences into one complex sentence by transferring one of them from independent clause to a dependent clause. And here, my friends, again, we write the same sentence. I visited the girl. When I reach to the object, I keep a distance here and I start writing the other independent clause here, my friends. Here I separated the object from the other part of the sentence. Here I visited the girl in the hospital. In here, my friends, I will insert the other independent clause to make it dependent. Again, I write the same independent clause, but again, my friends, I should delete the repeated object, and I write at the beginning of the dependent clause the appropriate adjective relative pronoun, which is whom, because it's an object. Here, my friends, I visited the girl whom my brother, again, hit. I don't repeat it again because it is mentioned before. Again, my friends, I don't repeat the same object in the sentence. Here, I replace it with a relative pronoun at the beginning of the dependent clause. I visited the girl whom my brother hit. Here, I don't write it. I carry on with his car by mistake in the hospital. Again, my friends, when I want to transfer two independent clauses or two simple sentences inside one complex sentence by transferring one of them into a dependent clause, when the repeated noun is an object, I write the first simple sentence as it is, and I keep a space. Here, I leave a space. Then I start transferring the other independent clause, but I will delete the repeated object, and I start the other dependent clause with a relative pronoun. I write I visited the girl whom my brother hit with his car by mistake. Again, my friends, please do not write the object. Again, don't repeat it because it is replaced with whom. Here, I visited the girl whom my brother hit with his car by mistake in the hospital. Here, I continue writing the simple sentence. Let's move to the other example, my friend here. I met my math teacher in the library yesterday. Here, I loved my math teacher so much. Again, my friends, I have the same object, which is my math teacher, repeated in two sentences, and it's an object. Again, my friends, I write the first simple sentence as it is. I met my math teacher. When I reach to the object, I keep or leave a space so that I can insert the independent clause and change it into a dependent clause. Then I write the rest of the words or the complement of the sentence. Again, my friends, here, I met my math teacher. I repeat the same independent clause, but this time I delete the repeated object and I start the inserted dependent clause now. Then, my friends, I start the dependent clause with whom, and again, my friends, I don't repeat the same object here. I met my math teacher whom I loved so much in the library. Now, my friends, let's move to talk about adjective relative pronouns in here for things. Again, my friends, things can be subject, object, and possessive. When they are subject, we use which and that. When they are object, we use which and that, again the same. And when they are in the possessive position, we use whose. In here, my friends, I would like to say that every time I can use whom and I can use that instead of whom, and I can use that instead of who in the previous examples. So using that is sometimes easier, especially for students who are not sure what to write. So this is a very quick piece of advice. If you are not sure to write who or whom, try to write that, and that can take its place. In here, my friends, for example, we can use that or whom, and here we can use that or whom. And the same thing applies to the sentences here. Let's start. In here, my friends, we say the first iPad was made in 2003. The first iPad was capable of using the internet. And again, my friends, when the subject is repeated, I have always two options. The first one is to consider the first simple sentence as the main sentence, as we see in blue here, and insert the second one as a dependent clause, or we can use the second simple sentence as the main sentence, which is in black here, and insert the first one as a dependent clause. Again, my friends, we should delete the subject, which is repeated in the inserted clause, so that we replace it with which. In here, my friends, the first iPad, which was capable of using the internet, was made in 2003. The second example here, the first iPad, which was made in 2003, was capable of using the internet. Again, my friends, if I don't want to use which, I can use that if I want, but using which for me is better. Again, my friends, here I try second example. The global warming has been threatening the life on Earth, or life on Earth. The global warming is the main challenge of this century. Again, my friends, we have the global warming as the subject, which is repeated. I have two options. The first one is to use the first simple sentence as the main sentence and insert the second independent clause or simple sentence and transfer it into a dependent clause by deleting the same or repeated subject and use which, because it's something, it's not a person, or we can use that. Or the other option is to consider the second simple sentence as the main sentence and transfer the first sentence into a dependent clause by deleting the same or the repeated subject and replace it with which or with that. And in here, as you see, we solve this problem. Now, my friends, let's continue talking about adjective relative pronouns for things. And after we talked about the subject position, and we said that we use which in that, now let's talk about the object position into which we use which and that again. My friends, in here, I take two examples. The first one, I bought the books from the university's bookshop. And here, the professor talked about the books. In here, my friends, we have the same object repeated into the first and the second independent clause or simple sentence. Again, my friends, I take one of them. Generally, I start with the first one. In here, I take it till I reach to the object. I keep a space. Then I carry on writing the complement of the sentence. Then I insert the second independent clause. I delete the repeated object, as you see here, my friends. And then I start this dependent clause with a relative pronoun. I use which, or I can use that. Then the sentence, I bought the books which, or that, the professor talked about in the last lecture from the university's bookshop. Again, my friends, please do not repeat the same object in the same sentence twice. This is the object and it's mentioned here. There is no need to mention the object in another time in the same sentence because we generally try to avoid repetition into the sentences. Again, my friends, second example, we have my mother sold the car and my sister crashed and destroyed the car 2 weeks ago. Again, my friends, I start with the first one, the first simple sentence or independent clause. I continue writing until I reach the object. In here, if I have a complement after the object, generally I write it after the space, but here, as long as we don't have, it's okay. I stop here, then I continue writing the same independent clause again, but generally, as I said, I delete the repeated object. Here, my sister crashed and destroyed 2 weeks ago, and I say here which. Again, my friends, I say my mother sold the car. In here, the car here, my friends, is an object which my sister crashed and destroyed. I don't repeat the same object in the same sentence. Again, my friends, it is not allowed or it's not correct to repeat the same object twice in the same sentence. That's why I delete it here. From the independent clause, I start the independent clause with a subordinating conjunction so that it becomes a dependent clause. And last but not least, I carry on talking about things, and here, my friends, I use whose. Again, my friends, I use whose when the described noun has a possessive pronoun or a possessive s. And here, my friends, we bought the car, and here the car's door. In here, my friends, I delete the possessive adjective or the noun with its possessive s, and I write whose. Here, we bought the car whose door unlocks with a fingerprint. The second example, my sister burned my book whose. I delete here the name with its possessive s or the possessive adjective. and I carry on writing the independent clause, changing it into dependent. Here, my friends, this was an independent clause because it starts with the subject, which is the name or a pronoun or a possessive adjective here, as you see. And here, this is an independent also. But as long as I delete the noun phrase, which is the subject here, and here I replace it with a subordinating conjunction, I change the independent clauses into dependent clauses, and the sentence becomes complex, my friends, because it contains one independent clause and a dependent clause, as this example here, the same, one independent clause and a dependent clause in the second example. That's it for today, my friends. I was about to continue talking about when and where, but because this video has become very long and I don't want to distract you and confuse you, I'm trying to make the videos as short as I can. But my friends, these topics are a little bit sensitive and they should be given whether we like it or not. So please, my friends, try to replay this video again if you don't understand any point, and try to play some Kahoot games which are related to adjective, relative, pronouns. In the next class, my friends, which is going to be part 3, I will have to talk about when and where as relative, adjective, relative pronouns. Thank you again, my friends, and I am sorry for making this video a little bit long.